Hey everybody, we're back. Okay. So where we left off, we were just talking about like the different tags that they would like graffiti on different buildings here or there, depending on like what different beefs and stuff that they were having with different people, etc., etc. And they provide, I'm not sure if they got this off social media or if this could have been a picture that they just took. Who knows? It wouldn't surprise me if it was on social media, though, because they literally, like I said, no one's that stupid. I don't think that they posted it on social media because they were dumb. I honestly think that they had some kind of, like, agreement with the police and whatnot that they could, like, do this stuff. Like, I cannot believe that this many people were that dumb. Like, they had to believe that they could keep getting away with it. Like I said in the other video in part 1. Okay. To further demonstrate their membership in and allegiance to the Hoovers enterprise, members would often refer to each other as Groove without the E, as homage to the gang's origins as Hoover Groovers. Members often referred to each other by their gang monikers and might not know each other's legal names. Wow. But you know what? That might actually be intentional, though. Like, especially considering that they're doing all this illegal activity. It probably doesn't help any of them for them to know each other's, like, you know, legal names. So that's probably more intentional than anything. The Hoovers did not have a formal procedure for joining the gang. Some members were admitted by virtue of familial connections or geographic location. Other members were jumped in, which required the new member to be physically beaten by more established members of the gang to demonstrate toughness and resilience. I don't know, this could just be an opinion, but that kind of seems like maybe they're downplaying that a little bit, because I've heard some pretty awful stuff that they do for initiation, but I don't know, those could be rumors, so I'm not going to speculate. Okay, each Hoover's set had senior members who could give orders to other members. The status of a senior member stemmed from, quote, work the Hoover had put in for the gang. Widely reputed members, such as defendant Armstead, were considered trophies in the Hoover gang, that is, some of the most active Hoover members, and were permitted to give orders to other members in their set. Despite this, Hoover members also worked individually to accomplish the Hoovers' control of criminal activities in their territory. So like I said, you know, the more and more you read it, the more culty it sounds. Like, am I right? Like, is that just me, or is it the big elephant in the room? And like I said, I'm not an expert on gangs and stuff, but it does seem like they have quite striking similarities. I'm just saying. You know, I mean, anyway. Okay. Associates of Hoovers from other gangs could obtain blessing from the Hoovers to commit crimes in the Hoovers' territories. Sometimes this involved paying taxes to operate in the territory. It might involve being jumped into the gang, and other times it involved developing a reputation for being a prolific, particularly violent or skilled criminal, or assisting well-regarded Hoovers in their criminal activities. At times, various Hoover sets would have disputes or beef with another set, but when it was time to put in work on behalf of the gang, including committing crimes such as shooting at rivals, carrying out robberies, or extorting local businesses, well, like Jesus, the Hoovers came together under the concept that no one is bigger than the program, referring to the overall enterprise. Yeah, like, another little red culty flag. Anywho, older members of the gang would serve as mentors, referred to as big homies within the enterprise. If a gang member just putting some chapstick on. If a gang member was under the wing of a big homie, that member took the moniker of the big homie, but as little homie. The next generation often took the designation tiny homie, and the generation after that took infant. The little tiny infant homies all respected the big homie. The younger generation of the Hoovers were indiscriminately violent against anyone they considered to be an op. which is short for opponent. Yeah, duh. That is someone who disrespected the Hoover's name or interfered with the enterprise's money-making criminal activities. Some in the old generation of Hoovers lamented that the young generation lacked a code of conduct. Many of the older generation Hoovers believed that the younger generation resorted to gunplay or shootings far too quickly when a simple assault would have sufficed. Yeah, I mean, true. But the concept of acting for the, quote, greater good of the Hoovers controlled. I think that was an unfinished sentence. I could be wrong. Hoovers largely controlled sex trafficking and prostitution in the Figueroa corridor. Members and associates of the enterprise acted as pimps, which is a person who befriends, recruits, trains, and or panders a person for prostitution. Like, we've covered this before. Like, there are different layers of these organizations. You got your pimps, you got your johns, you got your traffickers. Sometimes they act like as multiples. Like, sometimes you get the trafficker is the pimp. But, you know, they're different roles. Alright, pimps exploited commercial sex acts of victim sex workers, including minors, for the pimp's own personal gain and on behalf of the enterprise. Pimps might promote a lavish and powerful lifestyle to entice and coerce their victim sex workers with displays of large sums of money, for flashy jewelry, fancy cars, guns, drugs, group affiliation, and parties, among other things. Pimps also might demonstrate violence and control, including kidnapping, drugging, physical and mental abuse, and enslavement of victims. And this is a very important point here, okay? This is why Adam No Jumper, like, because they openly talk about all those things on that show and then podcast. Like, they openly talk about it. And not just in front of a small audience, mind you. Like, Adam No Jumper's huge. He has, like, millions of subscribers. Like, you really think that the police and stuff don't watch that? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if that don't come up. Because they openly talk about this stuff. And on Soft White Underbelly, too. Like, I mean, come on. They clearly thought that they would be able to get away with it. But anyway, the pimps aimed to control their sex workers, both so that the pimp was personally enriched and also to enhance the reputation of the enterprise. Like, look at that. That is just, like, absolutely disgusting. Those poor girls and stuff walking up and down Figueroa, probably barely anything to eat, like, starving, like, looking rough as crap, and you got these clowns acting like clowns, like, beating them, torturing them. Like, it's just wrong. Like, I don't want to hear the old generation talk about no code of conduct. Like, you made monsters, so, like, just stop. No one wants to hear that. Okay, like I said, there's obviously clearly older heads in all of this. Members of the enterprise facilitated each other's pimping, often referred to as the game, by managing and monitoring each other's sex trafficking victims, pooling resources to rent several motel rooms for commercial sex dates, disciplining each other's victims to intimidate the victim and show that the pimp's power extends beyond their own arm's reach, driving each other's victims to and from the Blade, the street where victims solicited commercial sex dates, sourcing third parties to create online profiles for sex advertisements, and sending each other money via financial applications, including Cash App, or rideshare rides to transport each other's sex workers for commercial sex dates. Enterprise members work collectively to maintain a steady presence at Hoover strongholds, especially at hotels where they engage in sex trafficking, to keep competitors out of their territory, and to further their monopoly on money-making criminal activities in their territory. To further each other's sex trafficking, enterprise members also apprise each other of the conditions on the various blades, notifying each other of when there were minimal customers, sometimes referring to the blade as dry. Then there were recruiting opportunities, sometimes referring to as new feet, and when law enforcement presence was high. The enterprise adhered to the rules of the game, which a pimp would teach any sex trafficking victim. The pimp turned out, that is, introduced to sex work. Hoover pimps taught their victims to maintain absolute loyalty, often literally branding their victims with their monikers to claim them as cattle. Pimps dictated how a victim interacted with clients, Johns or tricks. The other workers who worked for the pimp referred to as wifeys. Okay, the other sex workers who worked for the pimp referred to as wifeys. And with the pimp, a victim was required to remit all proceeds from commercial sex dates to the pimp. All, they say. A victim who did not or violated other rules of the game, referred to as being out of pocket, faced discipline, including assaults, berating and public humiliation, withholding of affection, drugs or food, draconian, quote, overtime hours, or firing. In exchange, a pimp was expected to provide protection from other pimps and johns, clothing, housing, food, and beauty services. Sex workers were required to have their hair and nails done at all times because their grooming was a status symbol that reflected on her pimp. Oh, God. And it's just heartbreaking, you know, because, like, you see, like, go watch an episode of No Jumper, and you see that these cultures are real. Like, the way they talk about these women, these children, like, it's so vile. It is so vile. They literally convince... Anywho. Okay. To start working for a pimp, a victim was required to pay a choosing fee. That is a payment for the privilege to work for that pimp. Victims were taught that once they choose a pimp, they were not permitted to speak or even look at other pimps, and they would face grave consequences for violating this rule. Similarly, if a victim attempted to leave her pimp, she was required to pay an exit fee or face grave consequences. After they already withhold most of her money and stuff, like, okay. Generally, if a person who was not a Hoover wanted to engage in pimping or sex trafficking activities in Hoover's territory, including on the Figueroa corridor, they were required to be in good standing with the Hoovers or have Hoover's permission to do so. If a non-Hoover pimp sex trafficked in Hoover's territory without the Hoover's authority to do so, that pimp risked being robbed and assaulted by Hoover's pimps, having his sex worker robbed and assaulted by Hoover's pimps, and having his sex worker, quote, knocked, meaning recruited away from him to work for a Hoover-associated pimp. So, like, they were literally just taking women, like, they're doing everything here in this indictment, but just saying it, like, and it's kind of getting on my nerves. But anyway, funny how even the government can sugarcoat things, right? God. I might have to take a break from this, guys, because, you know, I can only take but so much in one day. Anyways, what page are we on? Okay, I left off on page 13. I will pick up on page 14 tomorrow because it just gets way darker from here. And, you know, don't worry, I'm going to finish reading it because it gets vile. And we need to hear it. Okay, this isn't like trauma porn. This is real. These are real children, real people. Okay? And these other people running around like rabid pit bulls, just claiming ownership of people, of public streets. Like, enough is enough. Enough is enough. It's enough. Like, this cannot be okay. Like, think about something, and this is like right down the street from like everyone's like heroes, biggest, you know. And it's funny because they got all these celebrities who have all this money, like tons of money, and all of this is going right down the street from them, and like they just don't give a crap. They don't give a crap, even though they see it every day. What does that tell you about your heroes, about your favorites, that you go onto those gossip YouTube vlogs every day to watch? Like, it's just disgusting. I wish people would wake up and stop listening to the gossip and pay attention to this stuff. This stuff is like you realize, like, this is within walking distance of your heroes' houses. This is where this is happening. These human rights violations. But anyways, and who do you think pays for all of this sex with all these underage girls? Who do you think pays for it? If these aren't just me, I'm sure some Johns are, but like, there are rich guys going down there paying for this stuff too, because they know it's there. Like, it's just, people need to wake up. And anyways, I'll be back to pick up where I left off. Stay tuned.